So hi everyone, welcome to our QualiWare Users Group meeting for January, our first meeting of 2022. Thank you all very much for joining us. Our agenda for today is as follows. Introductions, of course, CloseReach news update with Kevin O'Rourke, our president. We then have Jacob Lund from QualiWare joining us to provide a QualiWare 10.5 demo and to answer questions. And then at the end of the meeting, we will have our Government of Canada community discussion around some accessibility and translation language issues that were raised at a community of practice meeting earlier this week. So Kevin, or actually last week, pardon me. So Kevin, I'm going to hand it over to you if you want to get us started with CloseReach news before we hand it over to Jacob.
In the introductions, you met 3 new people who started with CloseReach in the new year here. Just again, as a bit of a reminder, Joe Tomasini is a sales executive with us, and he'll be reaching out and dealing with new government customers as well as some of our existing ones, and also with our push into the private sector. Cecile and myself will still also be involved with, with sales to existing Government of Canada customers. Ralph Laceru, as I mentioned, is a lean and process management and compliance specialist. One of his jobs in the past was working for Heineken, so if you want to know any of the beer secrets, he's the guy to go talk to. And Jason Simmons actually has joined us as well, specialist in the information management and data domain with expertise using Archimate as well. So we're looking for Jason's help with customers that are running an Archimate and standard QualiWare model hybrid situation, and also to help us make effective use of the data and information re-engineering capabilities within QualiWare. And next month, you'll hear more details about Jason's talk that he's going to give at InfoNext coming up. And that's the Government of Canada BI conference and data conference. So that's it for new faces at CloseReach, but we are also looking to grow our delivery team further than this because of the demand. Next month, I'm hoping that we will actually be moving to Microsoft Teams, which will make it easier for some Government of Canada people to join QualiWare user group meetings. But until they roll out co-organizer capability, we don't want to run the risk of only one person managing the entire meeting. Because if their internet goes down, then the whole meeting's lost. So watch for that. You might see some emails coming your way as we approach the next meeting. In the past week or so, the Government of Canada had their QualiWare Community of Practice meeting. It was really quite interesting. Anne Beausoleil from PSPC gave a great presentation about how PSPC is approaching architecture and their use of QualiWare. And I think that is available on GC Collab. So it's those meetings run, I believe, every quarter. Dan, if I'm not mistaken, the next one's in April. And
yes, that's the plan.
So anyhow, they're great meetings where, as I say, GC clients share a lot of information about what they're working on and how they're using QualiWare. And one of the things that came up in that meeting was some discussion of accessibility and also the language capabilities within QualiWare. So that is now going to, and you may have seen that on our agenda. At the end of each meeting, we're going to have some discussions about the people who have interest in those areas to see what we can do to improve the level of knowledge and also improve QualiWare's capabilities in that area. So anyhow, it was, if you get the opportunity and you've got access to GC Collab, I highly recommend their community of practice meetings. And lastly, Roger Burleton, who's on the call today, is going to be running a business architecture training course with us. It's up on our website, and it will incorporate some of his new book. And I'll let Roger, this will serve as my introduction to Roger so he can carry on the conversation here. But for those that don't know, Roger has delivered a lot of training in the federal government space here back in the days when we could have face-to-face training. A number of different courses over the years, business architecture, as well as some business process digitalization courses and similar types of things. So, Roger, I think I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about the training that you're going to deliver.
Okay, all right. I thought I was at the end of the meeting, but this is okay.
I put you at the front of the meeting in case you had to go.
Well, it's not a problem. I'm pretty flexible. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a few slides.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to share a few slides if that's possible.
So for those that don't know Roger, Roger is in Vancouver, and he is, world renowned for his knowledge of business architecture and also business process management. So it's great that we have an expert in Canada with with that kind of knowledge.
Well, thanks so much for the introduction. It's a bit embarrassing, but it's good. So what the reason that we're just talking about this today is to introduce some of the ideas which will show up in the training, which will be, I think the way we're doing it is we're doing six sessions over 3 weeks, so we can get like 3.5 hours per session, so we can introduce a lot of the foundation of what business architecture is all about. And I know that many organizations have used the approaches that we advocate, and a lot of it is embedded in QualiWare anyway, and is quite implementable in QualiWare. And as Kevin has mentioned, there's a book coming out on supposed to be March 3rd is the release date. We're still actively doing final edits to sort of capture a lot of this type of stuff. So it's a bit timely that we're able to do this. But what I'm going to talk about now is some of the key aspects of what's going to show up there. And by the way, don't be afraid to jump in and ask questions as we're doing this. But I think ultimately, really what we're trying to do with business architecture is sort of turn that those really interesting statements of strategic intent, which everybody's like sort of like the hope, but how do you turn that hope into something operational and usable? So we're going to talk about how this business architecture approach is going to do that. And right now I'll say that my view on business architecture is not just the structural aspects of 4 or 5 model types. It's really something where you start with why you do things and you go all the way through until you're making it happen. It's a slightly broader view than what a lot of people have, but I feel that it's not about models. The models are a tool to help us to get to better ways of actually operating and running our organizations. So you've heard about me, but and I think that this whole idea, how do you turn a dream into a reality is what we're talking about. And this little Stephen Covey type quadrant here is an interesting one. It's really about the separation of ends and means. A lot of business architecture talks a lot about means, all the things you have to have. It talks about processes and capabilities and data and things like that. But that's just a means to an end. So the ends, though, if you just see in this little quadrant here, if you don't have any intention, don't know where you're going, and you have no means either, you do have a nightmare. But I mean, quite often we start with great statements of where we want to be. The executives are incredibly good at this, with no idea how we're going to get there. And then the executives complain about nobody listens to what they're saying. How come it never came to life, and so on. So really, what we want is we ultimately want the dream, and which is the ends, and we also want the means. This dream is going to come true. This is often where we end up, right? We have everybody focusing on things like business architecture and all kinds of other models, but they have no idea where it's going. Just think, okay, architecture is a good thing, so we'll do architecture. I refer to that as like walking in your sleep. You have no idea where it's going to take you, and so on. I want to make sure that we actually get to this top right corner and the things that we're going to talk about. And I hear a lot of people talk about, well, all we have to do as architects is we have to translate those intentions into reality. And I take a bit of an exception to that, because translation means trying to retain exactly what you had. It's really interpretation. And an interpreter doesn't translate. An interpreter actually finds the meaning and turns it into something which is understandable for another group of people. And if you look at all the people get involved in all the things we're trying to do, you've got business executives, you've got strategists, you've got all the different types of architects, people designing solutions, and there's all these different groups. And the issue is, how do we make sure we don't lose the intention when we're doing the interpretation? Because there's always some sort of interpretation that's taking place. So really what this is going to look like, excuse me for the busy diagram for now, this is sort of the journey that we will go through. It's what the book goes through. It's also what the training goes through. And what it says is that there's a bunch of things we have to do to define what the business is all about. There's a number of things we have to do to design the business, which a lot of traditional architects sort of play in here. But also it's an issue of how do we actually turn that into something which is priority, do the right things, and basically make sure we deliver what we promised. Ultimately is where we live happily ever after, where we sort of execute, measure, monitor, and so on. I'm just going to use one slide in each of these four sort of to tell you how that goes. So this first part is defining the business, is understanding the business model. How do we execute? What's our intention? How do we go about doing that? Understand what the external pressures are on the organization. There's lots of them. And understand who's in the outside world who we're serving and who's serving us, the stakeholders. And deriving from all of these, a North Star, a simplified, more elegant version of what success looks like. And also to define the specific strategic capabilities, not to be confused with functional capabilities, the strategic critical factors that have to be in place in order to be successful. The problem we see today is that quite often the strategic intent is not compelling, or nobody believes it, or nobody understands it, or it's too hard to understand, or it's too simple to believe. It's not focused on performance and results. It's just nice, vague statements. For the most part, they're inside out and not outside in, which we should be looking at. And quite a bit of the time, people do this as part of their annual exercise, and when it's done, they check the box and say, yeah, we're done. It's not really something which is really motivating for everybody else. Now, if we really want to do this right, we have to separate the ends from the means. Where we're going from the means, we have to match the means to the ends, which is what good architecture will do for us. We'll make sure we have measurable goals and targeted KPIs, so we can actually evaluate how we're doing as we're going. It's going to be external stakeholder driven, not inside, it's not about this department or that department, this other group. There's always some sort of time, a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is. And if you really want to be successful with this, you really have to keep this intention current. You have to sustain it. It's not a project. It's an ongoing way of life, so to speak, and it's communicated all the way through. So this first part is absolutely critical. Quite often missing. We find that that we really have people doing architecture work for the sake of doing architecture work, or so it seems. The next block is, again, where a lot of things where people will recognize this. And in this particular one, there's like 4 major components, and there's others, of course, that come into this. But the major ones we see are business information, or a lot of people would call business concepts. What is the business all about? I'm using the word business fairly loosely here for everyone. There's the issue of business processes as well. Now, some of you might call these things value stream stages, and so on, but a good process architecture keeps all that stuff together, from value chains to value streams to stages and so on, regardless of what you want to call them. And of course, we see a lot of emphasis in enterprise architecture around things like business capabilities. But you know what, your capabilities can be great, but if they're not serving the work that's being done, and they're not moving the information and keeping it current and reliable, they're not going to be of much value. And also we tie into this from the issue of business performance. Quite often people don't talk much about performance as a set of models in business architecture as well. But this is where we get into some very, very interesting issues. There have been debates raging for years around methodology. And there's a lot of dogmatism. People come from different backgrounds and they swear that their way is the only way, and you only need one of these. Do I need processes? Do I need capabilities? Is it all about information? They focus on a domain, and they're very much a functional orientation and not a cross-functional orientation connected to outside stakeholders who receive the benefits of all the things that we do and all the things that we build. A lot of focus on doing everything from scratch rather than sharing. And from an executive point of view, is quite often seen as a constraint to getting to solutions, right? So basically then what we find is the executives lose focus because they don't see how this is going to help them get to the result they're looking for. And so quite often you get people jumping to solutions, from problem to solution, rather than doing the proper architectural work. And quite often we do this work without real consideration for strategy and without having good decision criteria about what the North Star might be. So we want to do this right. We have to iterate. It takes a while to do this. You can't do any one domain perfectly without interacting with the others. Outside in, big issue around semantics. Big fights over what words mean and how they come together. So that's why conceptual modeling or concept modeling is really important. So we have to be traceable to specific goals, and we have to basically make sure we're sharing performance from the end to end, not just in my department, my group, my division, and so on. And it's also critical that we collaborate both back to strategy, but also back to implementation. So we're going to talk about that. Of course, at some point in time, you have to build things. And that's all the way from what are your priorities? And what we're saying is the priorities need to come from the architecture, and they don't come from a functional group inside the organization. So from there, we can build a transformation portfolio, make sure we can actually schedule that out properly, and actually do the building of all the different domains, not just information technology, but including things like workflows, policies, rules, organization, skills, competencies, facilities, locations, information, all that stuff is part of the transformation. This is not an IT play in and of itself, even though if we get good business architecture, IT is going to be much better off. So the risks here, we ignore the strategy. We just do what the loudest person in the room wants, and it's not connected to delivering of value. The value connection has got to be there. And quite often it's dominated by IT needs to build something, as opposed to worrying about the other domains. So if we want to get it right, we have to really make sure we have the right models in place and show how they interconnect. So if I have capability, I want to know all the processes, that are impacted or use that capability. If I've got a piece of information, I want to know every single place where that's used. And if I change it, I know the impact of change on everything else. It's this impact analysis, or avoiding unintended consequences, is going to be the key thing. So let's go a couple more slides and then I can open it up. Lastly, this is where we get the benefit. We execute the business. We basically measure the business according to the performance stack, the KPI stack that we build. We start to manage end to end and not just within our functional little group. So, and of course, we can do continuous improvement. But the risks here is that we don't implement well. We easily go back to functional management, and we don't end up with accountabilities for outcomes. So that's the risk if we don't do the other stuff right. Critical success factors, you need performance data. And one of the things that we advocate very strongly is when you're designing your architecture, you need to design the performance management framework. And you also need to design the mechanisms by which you're going to get that data so you can run analytics, gain insights, and make changes on a sustainable basis. So these are some of the things that we see. These are the major building blocks. The training class will take us through and how to do that with practice along the way. So our challenge is we often end up with dysfunctionality because each functional group does their own thing. We basically have to make sure we have traceability. So we know if I touch one thing, I know everything else is affected. We jump to projects before we connected the dots up properly. And reality does get in the way. I mean, that's just the fact of life. There's quite often personal conflicts. Different people have different interests and they're going to fight each other. Also, I think I'm sure a lot of you experienced this already. Quite often architecture is seen as an exercise and not a critical part of the mission of the organization. Sometimes it's focused on just getting the budget done, budget for projects, as opposed to making sure we're doing the right thing in the long term. Governance is a critical issue, of course, and communication. And all of this stuff is stuff we're going to deal with. So you can take me off the screen now, but that's basically what we're going to go with. Do we have any questions?
Thank you very much for that, Roger. That's really helpful.
Just to let people know, the course actually, it's posted on our website. If you go to our training market, the dates are March 14th, 15th, 22nd, 23rd, 28th, and 29th. So those 3 weeks, 2 days, 2 afternoons per week from 1 until 4:30 Eastern Standard Time.
And there'll be an email going out tomorrow to everyone just to, promote the training with the link to register if you're interested. So there's a little sneak peek there of what you can expect.
Roger, did you say everybody attending was going to get a copy of your book?
Yeah, I thought, I heard, Kevin, that you were going to buy a bunch of books and then give them to people.
Oh.
A great response, Roger. Thank you.
At a huge discount.
Discount, that's right.
Can you sign mine to Scott?
To Scott, that's right. Thank you very much
We'll sign
for that.
Virtually.
That's right. Okay, thank you so much, Roger. Appreciate that. So, Kevin, you wanted to have a conversation about the translation and accessibility topic that came up at the user group meeting on last week, and to invite our user group meeting attendees to join in that conversation.
Sure, thanks. At the community of practice meeting, there were a number of people talking about, I guess the topic of accessibility came up, and QualiWare provided a bit of a response. So if you're interested in that, I think you can go to to the meeting there on GC Collab to get that feedback. Obviously, it's something that there are deadlines coming down the road that needs to be in place. So it's something that QualiWare is well aware of. I wanted to talk, I guess, a little bit about French translation work that we've done. Some people are aware of the translation accelerator that that we built, that actually shared services helped pay for an upgrade to meet one of the releases where all of the templates were not covered. And some people, on this meeting may not even be aware that something like that actually exists. So, and those that are, some have issues with fr.xml files and things like that. So I really wanted to have a bit of an open forum here to, if people have issues, to raise them. We'll see if we can get some answers, figure out some workarounds. If there are certain departments doing some things that are useful from another department's perspective. We're going to alternate sort of this discussion every other month with the at the end of each meeting, or the alternating meetings, CloseReach will be presenting some QualiWare capabilities that people may not be aware of. So I guess we're looking at making this these two things operate alternating months. So I'm going to throw the forum out there. Adam, you may have something to say about D&D's experiences and some things that you'd like to see. And I know you've expressed some of those things to me in the past. So let's open up the floor, and if there's something you want to chat about, maybe we can get you an answer from somebody else in the community. And if not, we'll see what we can, we'll start to, I guess, collate these different issues, different ideas, and we'll see about being able to feed them in some kind of cohesive fashion to QualiWare if it's a software publisher thing that needs to be fixed. So I'm going to open up the floor, and if people are using the translator and they have challenges, or as I say, just creating language variants, thoughts, ideas, discussion.
Hi, Kevin. Adam.
Adam.
Hi, Adam.
I was just wondering, so the other day when Kuno was talking, he mentioned that he believed that the GUIs on the web front would automatically be French to a certain degree, and that wasn't our experience. And we're just wondering if you were able to look into that, or someone was able to look into that and find out what exactly Kuno meant by that.
So you're talking about, QualiWare out of the box, I guess presents what's kind of like what Jacob was talking about tonight, right? Simple versus advanced, which is the complete dialogue that's available, right, on the web. And you're talking about that in the French variant, correct?
Right. Had Jacob today switch the language to French and open that GUI, would the labels have displayed in French? Because it's our experience that they wouldn't have, unless someone had spent an immense amount of time generating all the HTML for each object type and then entering the French labels manually, or using the accelerator, or the translation accelerator, but still entering them themselves. And that's not the impression that I feel he feels. By memory of the conversation, he feels that there is some sort of automation to the French for those.
And you're talking about the labels here, not the content.
That's right, just the labels. Because yeah.
Yep.
Maybe I misunderstood what he said in that meeting the other day, but I got the impression he felt that those labels would be in French.
That was the impression that I had too, that of that conversation, Adam. What you're describing is the ticket or the issue that was reported with the screenshots by Pascal. Is that correct?
That I'm not sure about now.
Okay. Because I believe it was, but I will double check that.
Yeah, we haven't done. I mean, the meeting was just last week, right? So we haven't tested that out, but that is something that Cecile's going to find the ticket.
Oh, sorry, I forgot I was still sharing my screen.
You're displaying, Cecile.
Yeah, well, that's what I was looking for because this has been reported to QualiWare. I don't have any issue with sharing my screen while I'm looking for this, because if it's the same thing that I think we're talking about, which is why I asked Adam, this was reported, we tested, recreated, and reported it.
Okay.
And
so there may be something that's not activated that needs to be, that Kuno's, for Kuno to be saying that, the label should automatically change when you change, on the web front end, when you change languages. So that's something we will look into.
Like I feel that the D&D, this has held us back from using the full capabilities of the web. I personally believe that that we'd be much farther advanced because we don't really use the web GUI to edit attributes on objects, just because we would have to, either translate them all or have a very small set. What do we just do activities or activities in business processes? You're right, because like the scope of all the objects is humongous.
So I think there's a difference in point of view, like between what Kuno is saying and what's happening in real. I mean, if you create the dialogue layout in both language, it will change automatically when you change language on the front end. The thing is that, like Kuno showed, you get the advanced and versus a simple. So if you want a simple, you have to create the English version of that simple. Then you can create the French version of that simple. Then you will have a simple in French and a simple in English. But once you click on the advanced, if you haven't configured anything, it will take all of the field related to the object and create a dialogue layout with it. And that's where there's no translation. And Kuno seems to be surprised about that.
Provides the full, what they're now calling advanced, which is the full dialogue layout, correct?
Yes. So basically,
in English.
Yeah.
I guess the question is it also provided by QualiWare in French?
No, well, the thing is that it takes the XDLG file that is created with the meta model, and that's the information that is taken to generate the layout. Unless they have a French version of that same file that it can switch from one to the other, then there's no way you will have a French dialogue layout.
Well, you would be thinking. You would be thinking that in QLM, those attributes show up in French. So realistically, the same files that produce those dialogue labels should be used to create the French.
Yes, basically.
On the web.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in QLM, you have the .fr file that have the French translation for most of the labels, but those files are just for the TIC client. They're not for the web client.
So the question is, where's the equivalent on the website?
Yes. If you don't have that, the equivalent of that file, then there's no way you will have it translated automatically, I mean.
Okay.
And I just confirmed it now that it does not translate. We use the template accident, and we do not have a template form set up for that. And seeing it in English, seeing it in French, they're the same form.
Okay.
So I'm in agreement. Like, why this is an out of the box template that should have been translated on the fly.
So we will follow up with them on that. So that's the purpose of this time, right? So we can bring out things like that. And we haven't lost everybody yet. So that's a good thing, guys. Anyone else? Any other comments or things that you've encountered? We know that there are certain attributes that are difficult to get to provide a translation, you know, on the QLM side.
Maybe just I hesitate to raise this because there's nothing that can be done, but it's just how the software does the translation. It's doing like a revision. So in my example, I created accident and I filled it all in. What happens if I didn't fill it in? And then I went and created a new language variant for that accident. And then I put in some key fields like the date of when the accident occurred and who was there. Those aren't translatable fields. But because I did that in English and now I go and look at that French, those key fields are not there. They're really now two separate items, one in English, one in French. And what you think would be common fields tied to that one template of accident are not common. So as soon as you make your translation, you lose that inheritance from the previous one. And I know there's probably nothing that can be done. I'm just bitching about it.
Adam, do you want to talk about synchronization?
That's not entirely true because in D&D, well, arguably it does not work in the front end, but in the back end, in QLM, we have synchronization. So if you create a French accident and you set up the date, then the date is also in the English variant of that same accident. So the date will synchronize, the checkbox will synchronize. If you add a field, if you change a single link field, it will synchronize.
So not part of this translation software, but that would be key in making this work. I wouldn't know how to do that.
Well, no, that is not part of the of the accelerator. It's just set up in the QLM because initially before 6, by default, I think it was enabled. Now they disabled it. Now we just need to re-enable it.
I'll reach out to you later, Philip. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, the things you learn on these calls. Thank you.
You just need to be very careful. So there's a lot involved in that. Just for anyone else that's interested, because this is something that's very popular with our clients is the synchronization. But QualiWare has made it very difficult because if you have a frozen one language and you make the change in the other, we had to do a lot of work. Phil did a lot of work to make sure that it would create new revisions and it would make it possible to do that synchronization. So it's not a simple thing, and it would really be nice if QualiWare would step in and help with this for a future release.
Is this synchronization only going to work in QLM when I flip into the QEP environment? Will that be lost? Or is my service engine kicking in on that syncing?
I would say that for now, it will not work in the front end.
Okay.
We tied into the legacy QCL code to handle synchronization in QLM. Even though QualiWare turned it off by setting a variable, they didn't delete the code. So we just changed the variable to keep using it. but you can't use QCL code in that way from the web front end. So it would probably have to be recoded. And hopefully not by every government department individually.
Big sigh here. I'm not sure if you caught it there, Kevin. Big sigh.
I did.
And they will have a hard time doing it, because when you look at the database, you can easily identify the single link field and multi-link field, but the rest is plain text. I mean, checkbox, choice field, with choice field, radio button, it's all plain text. So you cannot even do a lookup if a checkbox change the other one. No, it's at least in the QLM you can see if it's checkbox or not. I guess they will have to do some JavaScript to do it, but it's certainly feasible. Yeah.
Is this worth putting in a ticket for? Because as much as I'm hearing Philip and Adam saying this works, you know, they're hacking the system, they're changing the variable, it's not supported, I'd prefer to see I don't have to jump through all those hoops. So is that just a ticket and then that gets bumped up higher on the synchronization?
D&D's trying to push this to QualiWare a couple times, and generally the response is that we're a very unique client. So if you were in, say, Germany, for example, and they had a process describing doing something in French or doing something in German and doing something in English, QualiWare has always said those diagrams could be different because the process in German might be different than the process in English. And I always responded and said, to us, this would be 4 diagrams, 2 in German describing the German process and 2 in English describing the English process. And so I was trying to say, this would be very handy for the government of Canada if it could treat it as the objects must be identical. Mm-hmm. But they would say it could be different.
Well, sorry, when you say the objects must be identical, are you talking about the model or the objects on the model? Because the models can't be identical because French is a lot longer than English.
It's a geometry problem.
Yeah, yes, but it's the same process, right? So technically, if you make your box on your diagram big enough for the French, even when you're in English, then they can be the same. Just make them big enough to fit the French when you do the English type. So the diagram will be the same, but I mean, having different size for the box because the text is bigger in French or whatever language. I mean, you go from A to B to C, and then it produces D. French, English, Japanese, or whatever other language you will use in Canada, doing that process will always be from A to B to C equals D.
Yeah.
But what Kuno is saying is that in English, it's A to B to C to equals D, but in German, it might be A to C to Z equals D.
Yeah, I don't.
But at that point, it's just a different process.
No, but it gives the same D at the end. So from QualiWare's point of view, that can happen. That the 2 process might be different because you speak French or English. What we're saying is that it doesn't make sense. I mean, yes, the language is going to be different, but it's going to be the same process, right?
Yeah. And then you throw on the extra dimension of that fundamentally, if you create a new object in the non-default language, and let's call it French at the moment, all you get is a generic name on the English object too. So that creates an interesting conundrum where you're literally having to tell French users to use the English GUI to put in their French object in French, just so we end up with them both synced when they create it. In the short terms at CVSA, we're just going with bilingual. We're not going with language variants. We're just going with everything with 2 names. Everything's going to be French and English, French and English, French and English, and we're going to just deal with the geometry problem. that things are going to be bigger because they'll have bigger labels, because we won't be jumping between French and English. You just have a bilingual GUI with bilingual data.
If I may, one thing I've seen, and
you don't need a bilingual GUI. You can select your GUI language, and then you're just dealing with bilingual content.
That's right.
Yep, that's one dimension too.
one thing other tool sets have implemented for dealing with languages is basically you would still have the same object, and then when you're configuring your system, you configure X amount of languages, and for each object, it'll have everything. You'll have attributes for each language. So then if you want to change the English or the French, you would just go under that English version of or French version of, and then change your labels for it. But the object itself is still the same. I don't know if that makes any sense the way I'm explaining it, but it works really well if you're doing like in the government of Canada setting.
That's basically how QualiWare works, right? If you create an object in English, then you put everything in it, like all the text you want to do, and change the link, add the link, and add whatever. And then you create the French one, and it's going to be an exact copy there. Then you can change the text to put the text. But now, if you want to change either or, I mean, if you want to change the English, say, well, you know what, that checkbox is no longer required. It should be no longer required in French, so it's synchronized. But if you want to change the text, then you open the French object, you change the French text, you open the English object, you change the English text without changing the GUI, right?
Yeah, but you're not in the same object anymore. You have to go to two different areas to apply those changes.
Why?
When
I mean,
I was doing testing, it would create a different revision for the one object. You would have.
It was a language variant. Yeah, and they were different revisions. But Philip, I understand what you're saying, and that sync is what is needed. The question is sync supported in 10x? And that, Kevin, goes back to what should I do? You want a ticket? Can you raise with Jacob? I know he's left, and it would be wrong to challenge him on it now. Crickets.
Well,
he's thinking.
Thinking. Those are the thinking crickets.
Yeah, those are the thinking crickets. Oh, that JR guy. Oh, is it at 5 o'clock? Is that time for the meeting to end now?
It is beer time. Yeah.
I mean, that is something we can go and ask the question of. And it's something, you know, I mean, frankly, you know, if you look at many softwares, you know, trying to get anything in French out of it, right, is tough. QualiWare has changed how they deal with language variants over the years, you know, and the difficulty also comes in again where you do get different revisions happening, right? I made a typo in my French and it's frozen. And the only way to fix that, you know, somebody pasted in the wrong thing and it got approved and it's frozen. You know, from a governance point of view, I'm going to have to create a new revision in French because of that. Do I also create a new revision in English when there's no changes? Now, that's the difficulty, you know, the challenge around some of this stuff. You know, because do I want to create that new revision in English? And then somebody's wondering, well, what the heck changed? Well, nothing did, because the change occurred on the French side.
But that is how it works now, right? If you have your both object that they're both approved, and there's a typo in the French one, you can just create a revision of the French, correct it, then reapprove it, and then.
So now your revisions are out of sync.
Yes, but does it matter?
It does. It shouldn't, but it does to some people.
Well, no.
That makes sense.
Well, then instead of using
I heard a no, though.
The people it matters to are typically the people that, only believe that activities should be numbered at each layer, which prevents reusability. But that's another issue.
Like
But
we
why
just
would you
proposed,
have different objects?
This is Paul. Can I say something?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Oh, poor tuning from ADM Matt, but I just want to add to this, and maybe DA can talk about it a bit, but if the modification to promote and create language variants, if there isn't anything yet in QualiWare standard, that modification saves hours of time for each update of a diagram or something, maybe. But that's maybe a little bit exaggeration, but I would say DA can talk a little bit about what they did there, but that is a very, very work-saving modification.
So I guess you're talking about being able to create a new revision for all language variant and then approve and promote all language at once.
Yeah, yes, and basically,
Yes.
since you can select the French variant, you don't need to change working
Yes.
languages.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I meant.
So for objects that are not on a governance workflow at D&D, we did introduce the capability for user to create the language variant from English, create the French from the English, instead of having to go to the French. And also, if both revision variant are approved and frozen, you can create a new revision of all language variant. It will create a new revision for both variant, and you can change whatever you do, and then you can reapprove and promote both language variant at the same time with one press of a button. It did improve quite a bit.
So for clarity, this doesn't help if you're making a modification to your diagram. But
No.
if you need to update the description of an object on the diagram, this will save a lot of time.
Yes.
So I'm going to take a takeaway from that is that we're going to gather some of the information that D&D's put together around, that simultaneous update of an object, and approval of an object. And we'll come back and share that with the community here. Okay?
This is Paul again. And when you to that list, you might as well add the translation tool there to update translations from an XML file.
That's already available to other department. They call that the accelerator.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, the translation accelerator, which originated, we used to call it the translation suite. And really it's not about, it actually doesn't do physical translation, right? But it makes it easier to extract content from one language into a spreadsheet that can go to someone to translate, in another column of the spreadsheet, and then re-import it, and it will create all of the French language variants for all of those objects for you. So we changed the name of that to the Translation Accelerator. It's been upgraded a couple of times, and yes, that's available to any department that requests it. We're kind of holder of the code right now. So.
And it's sweet. It's awesome. I did like 20,000 or 2,000 entries in less than 5 minutes, 3 minutes. Like, it was awesome.
Great.
Created the language variant, did it all for me. I thought, this is awesome.
Thank you,
so thank you for that.
Mr. Sabaran, take a bow.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
I guess as long as you don't change the format
I
of
knew
the
you were going to
XML.
say that. I knew you were going to say that. It wasn't me to change the format. It was translation service. Because I guess there's a spelling mistake in the header, and they changed the spelling mistake in the header. And I went, people.
Oh.
Anyway.
So Kevin,
It doesn't matter. Doesn't
So we
matter.
tell them, stop helping, stop helping.
Yeah.
so Kevin, is it going to be on your list regarding the labels for the web for the translation of like a way to translate those, especially for the future if QLM goes away and everything goes to a web-based?
Yeah, we're gonna raise this with QualiWare. I mean, if it's not in the ticket that we already have there, we're gonna explicitly have a meeting with Jacob to figure this out. So.
Yeah, two separate
I
issues, right? Two totally
Right.
different things. One's the form that's not bilingual,
Yes.
and the other is the syncing that we do not have enabled.
Yes. So the last question was about the labels, right? On the French website. So Kuno thought that was happening. We will follow that up, with a specific meeting with Jacob to
And as you all saw, I looked up the ticket and I sent it to Phil and Adam just now. And Phil, you can explain. You responded yes and no.
Well, yeah, the ticket was for they added some field a while back, like the UN tag tab under the associate, and those the translation for those did not make it into the .fr file. So that's what we're saying. So there's new
So in QLM,
in
QLM, those UN associated fields had no label translation.
No, that's it. We could add those lines in the fr.xml file, but we are under the impression that it should not be us, D&D, that does it. Should be QualiWare. They should either provide fr.xml or some sort of XML format that says, here's the new field that we've added with the translation. Then add those lines to your fr.xml and should be good to go.
So that's the QML side, and
Yes.
we will deal with that. And then there's the label side on the web client.
Don't use the word label.
Yes.
Because the labels are translated with the what they call the miscellaneous label in the publisher. So most of those labels are translated with that. It's truly the dialogue layout, like the dialogues when you want to edit an object.
Yes.
So because those one you can either create one and add the field that you want. So if you want your user to only edit 3 fields on an activity that contain hundreds of different value field, then you can create your own. And then that's easy to create the French one because there's only a few fields. But for the one that you don't use that often, like the accident or any other object in your repository, if you don't create a language variant of that dialogue layout, it's not automatically created.
Okay. Thank you. We'll use the right terminology.
It really matters when you talk to them.
Yes.
Yes,
Hey
it
guys,
does.
it's 5:07.
That's great.
Cecile, you can wrap up. We still got 35 people on.
I know. It's wonderful.
They're all asleep.
Thank you. Thank you all, everybody for staying for the meeting. I appreciate it. We have our next meeting will be, I believe it's the 28th of February. As Kevin mentioned earlier, we may be using a new platform. You'll certainly know in the next week or so, next week to 2 weeks, whether we'll be on GoToTraining or on Microsoft Teams. We're really leaning heavily towards switching over to Microsoft Teams. So hopefully our next meeting we'll be able to take advantage of that. We have an agenda planned for our February meeting already. Stephen Hayward from CBSA has graciously agreed to provide an update to a presentation that he provided at the QualiWare Community Practice meeting last year. So Stephen will be joining us to do that. And hopefully we'll have some more news from QualiWare on 10.5.1. And Jacob might be able to speak to some of that. So thanks very much, everybody, for your time. And we look forward to seeing you again next month.